Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Pastor Scott Show. Go to pastorscottshow.com to follow us online, pastorscottshow.com. Phone number is 888-528-2557. If you want to call and join the conversation, we talk about issues of the day from a Christian perspective. Go to clip 1.
There is no way to even think about, understand, absorb, explain, be rational about the founding without understanding the central role of the Holy Bible.
So the idea that all men are created equal and endowed with certain inalienable rights actually has its roots in Genesis chapter 1, where God says, let us make man in our image, and it has no other root. Unquestionably, America does have a Christian founding. It has a biblical founding.
That is a short trailer from a new film called Faith in America that comes to you from The Daily Citizen. It's put together by Zach Mettler, who we've had on our program many times, and he's back with us to talk about this film and talk about America's birthday. He's from The Daily Citizen, thedailycitizen.org. Zach, welcome back to the Pastor Scott Show.
Hey, Pastor Scott, good to be back with you, and thanks for having me back on.
Yeah, great to have you on. So your role in this, the note I got is that you're featured in the film, but I think you're more than that in this film as I'm taking a look at it. Tell us about your work on this film here.
Yeah, well, someone told me making a film would be easy, and they were wrong.
That's right.
But no, it was a great little adventure that we had making this really the celebration of America's history, and we're approaching the 250th anniversary of America. And my hope really was, hey, how can we speak into important issues that impact families, shape how people see our current culture, how people see our country? How can we speak into that in a new way? And thus, the idea for this film called Faith in America was born. And, we really wanted to look at just the role of Christianity, especially in America's founding, and then how our nation was shaped by Christian scriptures, Christian ideals, and Christian people. And that without Christianity, America would not exist. There's a debate that gets very heated often of whether we are a Christian nation. And if by that you mean that we're a theocracy and that every citizen has to be a Christian or when they're born, or they have to sign a form that says they're Christian, that's obviously not true. But if you mean by Christian nation that we are a nation that has been rooted in Christian scriptures, Christian principles, biblical principles, and that we would be an entirely different kind of nation without Christianity, then absolutely America has a Christian founding. And we really wanted to dive deep into that topic and really interview some experts for this film, Faith in America. We spoke with Michelle Bachmann, who ran for Republican nomination for president of the United States in 2012. We spoke with Tim Gagelein, who's our vice president of government here at Focus on the Family. We spoke with Dr. A.J. Nolte, who's a professor at Regent University, professor of government, just an absolutely astounding and very intelligent man. And so we spoke with some really great individuals who shared really good perspectives that we were able to capture in this film.
I think as you define the difference between what do people mean when they say Christian nation, I think there was a time when everybody kind of understood what that meant, that it didn't mean everybody's a Christian. And obviously that is the case. But I think people have, maybe because of our education system and agendas that are going on, don't realize that the foundations of our country come from Christian ideals and Christian notions and an understanding of the Scripture. Your film, Faith in America, it talks about that.
Yeah, it certainly does. And I think you're absolutely right. There's a lot of people in the media and academia and elected office who not only don't think that America was founded as a Christian nation, but think we were founded really apart from Christianity. There was an example just a few weeks ago. They had that Rededicate 250 event at the Capitol Hill. And Speaker Mike Johnson and a bunch of other elected officials spoke at that event. And Speaker Johnson, he prayed at that event, and he said this. He said that our rights do not derive from the government. They come from you, our Creator and Heavenly Father. Well, Katie Tur, who's a host on MS Now, she went and covered that event, and she asked a guest on her show about Johnson's prayer, about her remarks, and she said, she asked whether Johnson was putting God over the Declaration of Independence. And you're like, wait, hold on a second. He's not putting God over the Declaration. He's quoting from the Declaration.
Right.
That's a straight idea from the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so we have a very rich history of Christian teaching and Christian principles that were at the root of founding our nation, founding our country. And there's a lot of people, especially I think of individuals that work for the ACLU
Hmm.
or Freedom from Religion Foundation, that we have to be free from religion, as their kind of claim, that really kind of want to ignore a lot of this. And so it's up to us to really tell that story. And that's what we try to do in Faith in America.
And when you quoted, what Katie Tur did over there on Ms. Now, and that whole interview was wild when you realize that she's the one who's supposed to be sort of bringing the basis for whatever the conversation is, and she didn't realize he was just quoting from the Declaration of Independence. And not too long ago, Senator Tim Kaine, who could have been our vice president, most people forget he was the VP under Hillary if she would have won.
Hmm.
He said that the whole idea that our laws, our rights, that our rights come from God is very disturbing. And he said that makes us like Iran. And it was as if has no idea as a United States senator what our country is about and what we're founded on and where our freedoms come from.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a great example, and I had totally forgotten about that, and you're exactly right that, there's, again, so many people who just kinda wanna ignore our history and ignore, the importance of that founding idea that our rights are not granted to us by the government, but that they
Yeah.
are grounded in these eternal truths, established by God. That's something that's so important
And
for us to remember.
why is that important? Your film probably discusses this, but why is that important for people to understand, even if you're not Christian, that our rights come from God, that our rights are above government? Why is that so important that we keep that straight in our country?
Yeah. Well, I think it shows us that our rights are not just granted to us by the government. That shows that um, they're not these kind of ephemeral ideas, but these are real truths that we have rights to. Again, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. There's these concrete ideas that it is incumbent upon government to respect, not to grant. And so when we see those rights violated, we know that there's something nefarious going on. And especially with the Declaration, that idea, and you heard Dr. Nolte speak about that in our trailer, that we are created in God's image essentially is found now in the Declaration because of the Christian tradition that our nation was founded on, even before the Declaration was signed. You go back to 1607 when Reverend Hunt landed on the shores of Cape Henry, and there was 105 English settlers that came and established Jamestown. And the very first thing that they did was they bowed their heads on the shores at Cape Henry, and they prayed and they asked God to bless their efforts and to let the gospel go forth because of their efforts here to come to America's shores. And then they established a cross right there on the shores. And there's actually a memorial called the Cape Henry Cross, which you can go to today to still
Hmm.
visit and remember what they did there. So that was the purpose of the English settlers coming to our country. And then you have the Pilgrims coming over in the Mayflower in 1620,
Right.
just 13 years later, really seeking freedom to be able to worship God as they saw fit, apart from the official Church of England. So there's this long history, long Christian tradition that we have in our nation, even before the Declaration was signed. And because of that, we now go into the Declaration with people and Thomas Jefferson being able to write that these truths that men have rights that come from God is self-evident. In other words, this
Right.
is obvious. We know this. Everybody knows this, but it's really not self-evident without Christianity. And so we have to remember the importance of Christianity in rooting and establishing those ideals.
That's right. You're listening to the Pastor Scott Show. My guest is Zach Mettler. He is with the Daily Citizen, and we're talking about a film that he has put together that is called Faith in America, as we celebrate United States, the 250th anniversary of the United States. You can find it at thedailycitizen.org, thedailycitizen.org. There's a link right there. As we talk about this, it is something that I think we are in danger of losing some of those rights if we decide that they do come from the state. If we decide that. I always tell people that. I say, well, if you don't think they come from God, who they come from? Well, they come from the government. And I said, so you're putting your rights in the hands of Donald Trump? Like, he's the one who gets to decide whether, oh, well, no, not Donald Trump. Well, then you should have more confidence in that. Like, name me a person who you think ought to be the one granting or taking away your rights. And nobody likes that question. But that's something that when you study the history of the United States that goes back even a lot further. When you start talking about this philosophically, this is a Christian idea that goes back to the time of Christ, that goes back to what came out of the ministry of Jesus ultimately, that the byproduct of the Christian faith was freedom.
Mm.
And we still have that today. And I think that's important for people to understand.
Yeah. Absolutely, and there's another theme that we examine in the film, which is really the importance of Scripture on the founding of our nation. And there's multiple studies that have been done looking at the impact of the Bible on the American founding. And there's a scholar named Donald Lutz, and he did a study of what were the most cited sources at the time of the
Mm.
American founding. And he found that by far, far and away, the most cited source at the time of the founding was actually the Bible. It wasn't English Enlightenment thinkers and English authors, though they were cited. The number one source was actually Scripture. And I have a great book called "Reading the Bible with the Founding Fathers," written by Daniel Dreisbach, and he also chronicles just the amazing examples of how Christian scriptures have shaped and molded the thought and the writings of the founding fathers. They alluded to Scripture over and over again. They cited it in their personal writings.
Hmm.
It shaped how they thought. It shaped how they even spoke and the different cadences that they used in their own writings because they knew Scripture so well, especially the King James Version of the Bible. Because of that, it shaped how they even narrated and how they spoke and how they wrote. And so that's another thing we have to remember is the importance of Scripture in the founding of our nation. And again, the number one source that the founding fathers appealed to in establishing our country was the Bible.
And there should be a lot of required reading, I think, for Americans to go back and read the things that our founding fathers wrote, other than just the Declaration or the things that we, typically will see, And Dennis Prager wrote in one of his books that the most quoted book or source of any kind that's quoted by the founding fathers in all those writings is the book of Deuteronomy. That
Yep.
the drive for freedom is derived from the philosophy of who people are and the specialness of the human being that has to come from Scripture. That is important to understand, especially in a time when I think we are maybe we're losing. We're certainly losing the knowledge that we had of where our freedoms come from, but I think what follows is a loss of those freedoms. That freedom is not something that's free. It's something that you have to fight for, something that you have to keep on the forefront of things. When you look at this, how would you say that the Christian doctrines pave the way for the Declaration of Independence?
Yeah. I mean, really, it's that truths are self-evident and that the idea that men are created equal uses the declaration especially uses references God 5 times throughout the declaration.
Mm.
And so I think that that's really a key thing. And there's a drafting committee that drafted the Declaration of Independence, written mostly by Thomas Jefferson. But at the very end it talks about we pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Well, that doesn't serve any like binding political argument at the end of the declaration. It's really that they are pledging before God their sacred honor, their sacred oath here before God, that this is what they're intending to do is separate from Great Britain. So we have to remember that the Declaration especially is not just a political document, right? If you read it, it gives all their grievances that they have with King Charles III.
Hmm.
And lists the different grievances and reasons why they're separating. Those are all true and they're valid. But it's not only a political document, it is also a theological work based especially upon the Christian doctrine of the Imago Dei, that we have these rights that can't be violated, that King George III has been violating. And so there is certainly a Christian tradition that leads up to the Declaration and impacted it in just a fundamental way.
When you go through our history, and you're listening to the Pastor Scott Show, my guest is Zach Mettler. He is a writer with the Daily Citizen. You can find out more at theDailyCitizen.org, and they have put together a film. It is called Faith in America, and you can find that at theDailyCitizen.org, theDailyCitizen.org, and it's a film that helps show us the Christian founding of our country. So we're talking about that. People often point out, will say, well, what about slavery? Our nation's original sin. I've
Mhm.
heard a lot of people say, like, well, the only way it's a sin in a national standpoint is because it goes against the founding document, which it does. And the reason that we ultimately fought a war about it is because we knew that this idea of slavery that had been done in every culture around the world was evil. And it took the founding of our country for people to write that down, to say all men are created equal, and that
Yeah.
this comes from God. Um, that's one of the reasons that this is important, and I think it's a reason why Christians should be involved in the discussions of today of what's happening in our country and where our rights come from and how we ought to treat human beings from the time of conception, I believe, all the way through death. This should be something that we uphold in the same way. How should, when you look at this and Christians being involved politically, especially in a world today that's polarized sometimes about these very issues, how do we do that?
Yeah, and you're right. Slavery is certainly our original sin. It's a stain upon our nation. But we have to credit the founding fathers for planting really the seeds of freedom in the Declaration from the very beginning. It was irreconcilable with the idea that all men are created equal. Because of that phrase, because of that principle, eventually, thankfully, our nation
Yeah.
got rid of that
And
practice. So we
because
have
it
to
comes
remember,
from God, not the Constitution, right? That
absolutely.
that the rights come from God above government, and
Yeah.
you can't shake that.
Yeah, they predate any right that is established by the government. So that's certainly an important point. And then, especially for getting involved today, we quote Oz Guinness in our film, who talks about different nations going through civilizational moments, and that's what he thinks that we're in. We are in a moment where we either recommit to this amazing history and principles that we've been talking about, this Christian story that we have. We either find something else to be rooted in, which there's the rise of Islam is very present, the rise of secularism with individuals now largely becoming unaffiliated with religion. At least that's what they're telling surveys, and different things like that. There's other things we can be committed in, or we die. And there's three options. And he suggests and encourages believers to get involved, to get engaged, because those are the three options we have. And given our history, we want to recommit to the roots that made us great in the first place. And we quote Tim Gegeline in our film, who says this. He says, "Democracy is not a spectator sport. You have to get off the bench and get
Hmm.
engaged." And I think that's exactly right. So I'd encourage everybody. Number one, watch the film. I'd love people to do that. You can go to the YouTube or our website, The Daily Citizen, to watch Faith in America. But we have elections going on currently, and elections that are going to be taking place later this year. If you're not registered to vote, there's millions of Christians who aren't registered to vote. I'd encourage them to get registered. And then if you are registered to vote, and then really consider potentially running for office yourselves. We've seen that especially the last few years of Christians who are taking small steps. I have a coworker actually who's run for just school board. She saw
Hmm.
that there was some things that needed fixed in her children's schools, and she said, "Well, by golly, I'm going to be the one to run for school board and get elected, and I'll help fix it myself." I'd encourage everybody to consider doing that, and it's not a full-time job. It's a small way to get involved. It will involve some work and some sacrifice, but America would not be America without the hard work, involvement, engagement, and sacrifice of Christian people throughout our story. I think of especially President George Washington, who was himself a man of faith. He considered himself a Christian, even if he wasn't perfectly orthodox necessarily. But he especially think of the painting of him praying at Valley Forge. Right, this is something that was important to him. And then he was the one who called for the establishment of the Chaplains Corps, which is now the oldest branch of the U.S. military, because he knew how important the spiritual health of his troops was
Hmm.
during the Revolutionary War. And then, there's other things that he's done that we can look at and see just how he saw faith. And, I think that's a great example for us today. Washington served 2 terms as president and said, "You know what? I'm going back to Virginia. I'm not going to be king. I just want to do my time in service and then get out of here and go back to my farm." And I think that's a great example for us today. How can we serve, especially as Christians, in a spirit of humility and service? How can we do that? I think that's a good thing to think about as we approach July 4th.
The film is called Faith in America, and you can find it. The best place to find it is thedailyscitizen.org. Thedailyscitizen.org. There's a link right at the top of the page there. You can also find it on YouTube. Zach Mettler is my guest. He is with the Daily Citizen. Zach, tell us real quick about the Daily Citizen.
Yeah, me and about 4 or 5 colleagues, we write articles on a daily basis, informing our readers about different issues in terms of life, marriage, religious freedom, free speech, transgenderism, homosexuality, a bunch of hot topic
A bunch
issues.
of light topics you guys write
I
about over
know.
there.
If you want some heavy issues, you can come to the Daily Citizen. We do try to provide some light commentary here and there, but you can go to thedailyscitizen.org and subscribe. We have a newsletter we send out Monday through Friday with the top 10 stories that we at Focus are tracking. And then we send a weekly Friday newsletter with our top 5 stories that me and my team have written. So you can find all that at thedailyscitizen.org.
At thedailyscitizen.org. Zach Mettler, thanks for joining me on the Pastor Scott Show today.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
All right, the film is called Faith in America. You can find it, watch it with your family at thedailyscitizen.org, thedailyscitizen.org. This is the Pastor Scott Show, pastorscottshow.com, and we'll be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back, everybody. Pastor Scott Show. Go to pastorscottshow.com to connect with us online, pastorscottshow.com. It is 4th of July week, and our 250th anniversary, of course, is coming up on Saturday. And right now in Washington, D.C. is the Great American State Fair. And every state is represented, plus a whole lot of other groups, including our own Focus on the Family is there. And joining me right now from Washington, D.C. is Bob DeMoss. Bob is a corporate storyteller for Focus on the Family. He's a veteran Christian writer, producer, and communicator, founder of PluggedIn.com, and we talk about them a lot on our program. And he's been very closely connected with Focus on the Family's children's audio drama Adventures in Odyssey, and he has been dispatched to Washington, D.C. for the Great American State Fair. Bob, welcome back to the Pastor Scott Show.
Yeah, thank you. It's so good to be with you again. And I like the word dispatched. It's like deployed, right?
That's
Boots
right.
on the ground, camping down here for 3 weeks, it feels very much like that. So it's a good choice of words.
They had to send somebody, right? And you get to go.
The short straw.
That's right. You know what, though? It's probably a lot of fun. I've seen pictures. I'd love to go check it out. What's it like out there at the State Fair? Describe it for us.
Yeah, so, it's interesting how our president had a vision for bringing the country together for our birthday. Like, what could be wrong with that? Some people still find a problem with that. I don't understand.
Yeah.
When you said all 50 states are represented, there's 4 or 5 blue states that have chosen not to play ball. Which
I thought they all came. Oh.
There's some that just are like, nah, we're not going to be a part of it. And it's like we're celebrating the dedication and the foundation of our country and the liberty that we all enjoy, the freedoms we all enjoy. And there is so much to see. All of the other booths that are surrounded, like we're talking from 4th Street to 14th. So basically a mile on the mall, lined both sides with all these incredible booths. And then there are 5 specialty pavilions. And we're in the central one right by the Smithsonian Castle, where it's the Faith Pavilion, Faith and Family Pavilion, and then the arts on the other half of it. So we're in an air-conditioned space most of the time.
Yes.
And with the doors keep opening with all the people coming in, it's like sometimes it's like, okay, it's getting a little warm in here. But yeah, we're set up there, Focus on the Family. We have a 30-foot booth, a big 22-foot LED wall. I mean, it's just pretty exciting to be a part of this. Out on the pavilion, every day there's a flyover with some incredible jet formations and live concert stuff going on, and plenty of security for those who are concerned about that. The encouraging of people to come and be in a family faith safe environment is clearly operational, and so that's been really great to see.
Well, we know the crime is down, and you probably got some National Guard here and there over there, so it should feel fun. And big fireworks show, supposed to be the biggest ever in the world, or is that just a Trumpism? Biggest ever seen, biggest, or is it actually the biggest? It could be coming up on Saturday.
They're going to be, he uses the phrase bigly. I only just recently learned that bigly is him saying big league. So these fireworks are going to be big league, but he says bigly. So They probably will be pretty massive. I will say that because he doesn't like being outdone by anybody. So,
That's right.
anyway, we're expecting that. And the Ferris wheel, the Smithsonian 110-foot Ferris wheel that was completely reconstructed and refurbished, and a carousel with some gorgeous handcrafted. Remember when you were a kid, you get on those deals with the horses and the wood and the thing and the colors and the music and everything. There's really some neat things taking place.
What about the food now? I would eventually wander around and go, can I get some ice creams or corn dogs? What do they have that's very specific Americana?
Yeah, you name it, snow cones, ice cream, 1.5 foot long sausage deals on a roll and different wraps. And I mean, no, they've got it all. You're not going to be for want on that. They're really intentional too about everything down to the porta potties. Like they can anticipate, they are anticipating 1 million people on the 4th. So it's going to be pretty packed in there. You're going to get a great view if you're in the Great American State Fair. If you're anywhere on that fairground, because the monument's straight ahead, you're going to have a gorgeous view. And they're talking about lighting up the monument itself with America 250 on it. And
yeah,
I just love the intentionality, Pastor, just with the way, like, I'm not saying any other president couldn't have done something like this, but ours is being intentional to include the faith element in a big way. We were personally invited to focus on the family by the White House to come and talk about our Adventures in Odyssey program because of the fact that we have had for, I don't know, many years ago, we're 40 years into Adventures in Odyssey, but we have a whole series for God and Country of talking about this, the founding of our founding fathers and the role of faith and prayer in their lives, as well as the men and women of faith over the course of our history. We highlight actually 16 of those episodes that we're allowing. We've set it up for families to stream it free while they're driving or flying or whatever, wanting to celebrate Independence Day. So family250.com, we have all those 16 episodes posted there. And I'd certainly invite people, even if they can't make it to DC. I know California's a long way, but if you can't make it, you just, as you're driving around with the family this time of year, it's a great season to reflect on the way that our country, the men and women who fought and bled for our freedoms that we enjoy today, what was the role of faith and their relationship with the Lord that gave them that courage, that gave them that sense of purpose and a drive to define the future for our country. We've got a great responsibility, I think, to teach our kids to stand on the backs of those who came before us.
That's right. And I think we see that a lot in the news, some things that are going on in our country. There's always tensions and there's always people with competing philosophies. This is why we need to teach our kids. And you're listening to the Pastor Scott Show. My guest is Bob DeMoss. He's with Focus on the Family. You can go to family250.com, family250.com to connect and to get those episodes of Adventures in Odyssey right there from that website and teach your kids, maybe even teach yourself, actually, quite a bit about the country. Because, there's something, Bob, that I think we have to acknowledge is that in the last few years, we have not done a good job at really teaching the history of our country, and in particular, how faith led to the ultimate existence and the founding philosophies of our country.
Yeah, this is the thing. Even you said even adults can learn. When I was working with the team to put together this collection, one of the things that I literally listened through all 16 episodes, and it was just fascinating. But when you look at, Paul Revere's famous Midnight Ride and the shot heard around the world, a lot of the stories around that came forth from a poem by Longfellow. And the fact is, sadly, the esteemed poet got some details incorrect. So when the Adventures in Odyssey team said, let's tell that story, they start doing research. They're like, well, wait a minute, that's not what really happened. So one of the things you get with Focus on the Family is a commitment to excellence, a commitment to historicity, to being historically accurate. And so to the best of our ability, those episodes, like when you listen to them, you find stuff that you didn't know, and it's not fiction in the sense that it's not made up history, it's not revisionist history at all. In fact, there's a special, you might like this, Pastor. There's a special bonus episode that's a radio theater called The Legend of Squanto, which is sort of capturing that the history around the first Thanksgiving in the country. And it's not Adventures in Odyssey, it's a radio theater. So it's really more for adults in many ways. So there's something for everybody at the family250.com site that's story driven, that's history driven, and that's biblically accurate as well.
So I'd say everybody take a moment today and go over to Family 250 and check it out. Look at those free episodes and make a plan actually this week to spend some time with your family or your grandkids and or even just yourself and learn about our great country. My guest is Bob DeMoss. He is at the Great American State Fair. Bob, we're going to be seeing you or some other people, I think, all week long from the State Fair. What are you looking forward to doing that you haven't been able to do yet at the State Fair?
Well, I want to get on that Ferris wheel. That would be really cool. 110 feet up. You know how high you can see across D.C. at that level? That would be really awesome. If I can get, the lines aren't too bad right now. There's plenty of room, so y'all come on down.
Yeah, well,
as they say.
Yeah, y'all come on down or across the flyover states, as unfortunately people say here in LA. But right. I'm glad that all of those or most of those flyover states are there, and we'll call out the couple who didn't make it because they should be there. Well, Bob, it's great to talk with you, and I look forward to hearing more from you this week and more from the folks at Focus on the Family who are there all week long at the Faith and Family Pavilion? Is that what they call it?
Yep, Faith and Family Pavilion. Yep, right in the middle on 7th Street or 8th Street, whatever. It's right there across from the Smithsonian. Yeah,
so if you happen to be going there, check it out. Say hello from the Pastor Scott Show to Bob if you are there. And go over to family250.com, family250.com. That's where you can find your Adventures in Odyssey episodes and a whole lot more information to share with your family. Bob, thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next time. Have a good time.
Sounds great. Thank you, Pastor.
You'll have to let me know about the Ferris wheel and whether or not it's like terrifying up there.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Everybody, this is the Pastor Scott Show. Go to pastorscottshow.com to connect with us online, pastorscottshow.com. We'll be right back. 888-528-2557 is the number, 888-528-2557. What are your 4th of July plans? What are you looking forward to the most? 888-528-2557. You can call right now. We'll be back as the Monday edition of the Pastor Scott Show continues. Stay tuned. Welcome back, everybody. Pastor Scott Show. We're live on Monday. Great to be with you today. 888-528-2557 is the number, 888-528-2557. If you want to join the conversations, go to 134.
So right when the clock strikes midnight on the 4th of July is when we hope to be arriving into the D.C. metro area. From there, we're actually going to have an event on the track just outside D.C. in Arlington, where as many people who want to have a chance to carry the flag can do that going around a track. And then from there, we're going to do our final run into the city right around 10 a.m. and finish right at the Capitol building. We're both going to have a huge finish line at the Capitol building where anyone who joins us for that last stretch can participate. And then we're also working with the Freedom 250 team to have an additional finish inside the security perimeter on the Washington Mall. We've got a couple of other really big things that we have planned, but we don't want to spoil the surprise. So all I would say to those who are watching is we want you to come out and you'll get to see the big show.
That is from a group called Relay for America, and they are literally running a relay race across the United States. Started a few weeks ago in San Francisco, and they are running across the United States on foot, actually, and they are now in Indiana, just about an hour north of Indianapolis, running across the country, and they plan to arrive in Washington, D.C. on Saturday for July 4th, the 250th birthday of our country. What are you doing? What's your plans for the 250th birthday? Are you doing anything special? Is it the same old, your usual 4th of July routine, or are you doing something a little extra this year for 250 years? 888-528-2557 is the number. 888-528-2557 is the number. You can call right now. We're live. 888-528-2557. Go to 132.
Relay for America has a really simple mission, which is uniting Americans 1 mile at a time. And we think that America is still an exceptional place. I think that there's this narrative that People like to talk about all the things that are wrong with America, and really the spirit of this relay is showing all the things that are right with America. We're a couple of young people. We love this country, and we had this big idea that for America's 250th birthday, we wanted to do something really special to bring people together and accomplish a really big goal. So on Sunday morning at the Pacific Ocean, we set off with a pretty small crew of about 15 people and this big dream of going coast to coast. And now for 3,019 miles straight at about a 9-minute average pace through the day, through the night, the flag will never stop moving until it gets to Washington, D.C.
So that's pretty fun. A lot of things happening in the country today, and I know it doesn't get as much press as it should because of the dumb divisions that we have, and we should come together. You know, the situations that you have in a country with politicians you don't like or movements that you don't like too much, you know what? Everything is temporary. And if you stay engaged, things get better as long as the Lord wills that to happen. And we are still blessed to be in the greatest country ever to be on planet Earth. And I pray that the Lord lets us keep doing that. So how are you celebrating America's 250th birthday this weekend? 888-528-2557. Where's a fun place to go? Maybe people haven't decided yet what they're going to do. 888-528-2557. Our last interview, it was mentioned, we were talking about the Great American State Fair. That really kicks off later on this week as people come to Washington, D.C., where they will have a huge fireworks display. There are several states that are not participating, although some that are on this list. I looked it up because I thought, how many of these? He said 4 or 5, and that might be right. There are a few that said they weren't coming, and then they changed their mind. So Pennsylvania is one of those things. There's different reasons. There's a couple who opted out because they don't like Trump. Like, that's the reason, or they're afraid that Trump is going to make it partisan thing, so they didn't want to participate in that. Some just because they didn't find a sponsor, right? You got to put this together and build it. And often, you know, these things are planned for years, but we got off to a very slow start several years ago with all of this. And so for some states, particularly if you are struggling financially, it was hard to do. But you know what? California is there, and I'm glad about that.
I take offense at our policies and strategies.
Oh, I don't take offense at the fact that we are there, even though our governor doesn't agree with the president. I think that's the way it should be. It's intended to be nonpartisan, and I think that everything we do for 4th of July should be that way, just to celebrate the freedoms that we even have just to disagree, and why we should maintain that. What are you doing for 4th of July? 888-528-2557. You got plans, Jose, yet? Have you figured it out, what you're going to do for 4th of July?
I'm going to go to a friend's house. We're going to have a barbecue.
All right, that's good. Now you watching fireworks at the friend's house, or you're going somewhere else after that?
See, I don't know if they're going to have fireworks, because aren't they? They're illegal?
That depends on how you do your barbecue.
Well, if other neighbors want to set off fireworks, I'm not going to call nobody. That's all I'm going to say.
You know, I'll tell you what. One of the things about being in Los Angeles, so for 25 years I lived in San Diego, and we're actually going to be in San Diego for the 4th. But the last few years I've been here in L.A. You don't need to go anywhere because half your neighborhood is shooting off fireworks from their backyard. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably going to see fireworks. The neighbors are probably going to shoot off fireworks, so I'm not going to go nowhere. I just got to be there.
Where are people getting these fireworks? And why is this kind of an LA thing? Because there were a few people who did that in San Diego, but not very many. I mean, they're boasting about the Washington, D.C. going to have the biggest fireworks display maybe ever, right? But I think if you actually were to combine all the stuff that's going on in the sky over Los Angeles, it's probably not even close.
Yeah, I remember watching a video where it was like the sky cam from ABC7.
Oh, yeah.
Over 4th of July, and there was just fireworks everywhere. That kind of fell off a little when COVID hit. So I want to see it, get back to its former days.
I think I think there's been a rebound for that because we have been to a baseball game a couple of times. And if you go to Dodger Stadium and you end up, there used to be some good places to park at Dodger Stadium. Not anymore. You just got a sellout crowd. You're going to be there for 3 hours trying to get out. So we just sat on the edge of the cliff, kind of looking a little bit towards downtown. And there were so many fireworks going on for 2 hours. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, I think last year I went to a place called Reseda Point, which kind of overlooks the San Fernando Valley.
Yeah.
So I just saw fireworks. It's very close to Shepherd Church, so you can see their fireworks show too. Because I know they put on a good show every year.
And they do in Shepherd Church. If you go over to their website, one of our partners here in Los Angeles, KKLA, they do have a really good program coming up this weekend, so you should check it out. Check out Shepherd Church's website. This is the Pastor Scott Show. Go to pastorscottshow.com, pastorscottshow.com to connect with us online, pastorscottshow.com. And we're talking about America 250, our 250th birthday, and I think that you should do something to celebrate it, but not just the normal thing. Maybe you got your normal routine. You're going to go see some fireworks in your city and whatever. Or you're just going to just look up in the sky in L.A. Everybody's shooting them off. It's not legal, by the way, just in case anybody's wondering about that. And they've got drones. I read that the LAPD has drones flying around to try to figure out who the biggest offenders are this year. Somehow I bet those drones are getting shot out of the sky. That's probably going to happen. But you know what? It is worth taking some time, and we'll do some of that this week. Every show this week we'll do something related to America 250, and it's worth reading the Declaration of Independence. It's worth going through that and understanding why we have to fight for freedom. We'll talk about that a little bit more coming up here, but freedom is not free. It's something that, I think that the natural course of things in human sinfulness is to ultimately enslave, is to ultimately not love your neighbor. It is to beat your neighbor. It is ultimately to put yourself in the best position that you possibly can. See, if there's no God, then that is what you should do as a creature on this planet, right? There's no basis for morality. There's no basis for love. If there's no God and there's no greater law that we have to follow, if in fact we are not endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights just based on the fact that we're human beings, if that statement from the Declaration of Independence is not true, ultimately, true in cosmic justice, if that's not true, you know what? Then moral arguments are only based upon who has the most power or the most influence or maybe the most talent or the most money. And that's the way the world operates on its own. Somebody gets to be king, somebody becomes a tyrant, somebody will enslave groups of people. People will take everything for themselves, murder with impunity, and that has been the course of humanity. For all of human history, that has been the struggle for human beings when it comes to culture and government. And one of the reasons that the United States has been so successful, one of the reasons that in 250 years we became the global power, it's because we had freedom that was launched from a certain idea. And the idea is that human rights don't come from government. There have been other movements of democracy, other movements of voting in different ways, other movements to try to get a free people ruled by law. And, those are some of our greatest documents in history, starting from the Ten Commandments to many other things that have been written that you can see in museums that take power away from the chief executive, right? That either point you to God or say that there's the king is still under the law, those kinds of things. But the winning document, probably one of the greatest things ever penned when it comes to human freedom and the freedom of people, is the Declaration of Independence. In fact, every time that even in our country we've had slavery or we've had other things of injustice or the ignoring of human rights in various ways, we are ignoring that principal understanding of who we are as human beings. That government is not the bestower of human rights. Government's job is to defend those rights that you have simply because you are human. As Christians, we believe that it's the Christian God who gives those rights. It's the Christian God who wants us to be free. The book of Galatians, it's a big part of Christian theology, is that you will be free. The truth will set you free. Truth in this life sets you free, but also the truth about human beings, about our nature, what makes us tick, how we work, the truth about the fallenness of human beings. If you don't believe in the fallenness of human beings, you will be in a lot of trouble. If you believe that human beings are going to just find a way on their own without a higher law than what humans can do, that somehow we're just going to love each other and somehow we're just going to take care of each other, that's never happened. It only happens when there is a respect for the Almighty. It only happens in countries that are based on the fact that our rights come from our Creator, and you can't take those away. All right, this is the Pastor Scott Show. Go to pastorscottshow.com to connect with us online, pastorscottshow.com, 888-528-2557, 888-528-2557. We'll be back as the Pastor Scott Show Monday edition continues live. Stay tuned. Hey, everybody, it's the Pastor Scott Show. We're live on Monday. Great to be with you. We're together each and every weekday from 3 to 5. Go to pastorscottshow.com to connect with us online, pastorscottshow.com. Phone number, if you want to join the conversation, is 888-528-2557, 888-528-2557. Number 4.
Well, one of your new candidates, Avila Chevalier, who won last night, wants to abolish the police and all prisons. She was asked 4 times, how would you deal with somebody who committed murder then? What is your plan? And she dodged and didn't answer. She tweeted that Obama is evil, Biden is a rapist and a war criminal, and bleep Kamala Harris. These were not people running on an affordability agenda. These were left-wing extremists that were elected last night at the expense of moderate Democrats. So a seat that you guys do need to win if you want to take back the House.
I don't like the way she sounds at all.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Well, but she's not the party. But she's one person.
But that is the point.
That's a discussion on The View about a new congressional candidate who will probably go to Congress from New York. Her name is, she goes by DAC. You've heard of AOC. This is DAC. Dar Aliza Avila. It's either Chevalier or Chevalier, one of the two. And what they're referring to there is that she was asked 4 times by the New York editorial board when she's running for Congress about what should happen to murderers, because she believes that there should be no prisons and no police at all. So the question was, well, as a self-described prison abolitionist and somebody who believes that there should be no prison, no police, what should be done with somebody who commits a murder? And her statement was, this is a tragic reflection of the systems that allowed that circumstance to be possible. So she'll blame the systems on murder. Otherwise, no one murders, right? It's only the system that creates murder. Anyway, this person is probably going to be in Congress. She's one of about 100 Democratic Socialists of America, not people who just say they're socialists. And that's what I want to get into today a little bit, is what does socialism mean to you? Because what it means to this crowd, there's a lot of variance of opinion, but what it means as far as what they've written down is probably different than what a lot of people think it means. What does socialism mean to you? And is it good or is it bad or is it indifference? What do you think? 888-528-2557, 888-528-2557. And as we take your calls, it's time for our socialism update. This is what's happening when it comes to the warmth of collectivism.
Or not, it's all supplied. Just don't ask where the money hides. Free for all, just fall in line. What is yours is now combined. It's the socialism update, hear the call. The state knows best for one and all. The state provides. The state decides.
This has been probably the biggest news conversation over the weekend when it comes to politics, because it is something that is very radical that has happened. This is Van Jones on CNN 3131.
Look, I used to be on the left side of Pluto, but to have somebody who, you know, their main qualification for being in our party is they were celebrating after October 8th the murder of innocent Israelis, to have somebody in our party get the nomination whose main qualification is saying that there should be no police, no prisons, Israel shouldn't exist, it's a red flashing light. And I think people who have more reasonable ideas in this party are going to have to start working. Because what's happening is the establishment thinks that you can just buy ads and get endorsements. That's going to somehow help you win. Trump figured out the hard way, you can't win in Iran with just bombers if you have nothing on the ground. Moderates cannot win in these blue districts if they have nothing on the ground. If all they have are ads and endorsements, and they don't have the door-knocking army of the DSA, you're going to see more and more of these candidates.
Now, Van Jones, as he just described, is normally left of Pluto, is where he is on the political spectrum. And yet even he is not excited about the Democratic Socialists who are in many people's view, taking over the Democratic Party. But one of the things he mentions I think is really important here is that why is this happening? Why does somebody who this isn't just defund the police. This is have no police. And I'm not going to offer anything that is different. This is we're going to have no prisons. Also, no borders. Also, no just about anything that you might be used to. The Democratic Socialists of America, in their new published platform, they also want no president, no Supreme Court, expanded Congress, no Senate, though, just the expanded House of Representatives. Whole bunch of stuff like that. How does somebody like this actually get elected? Because I'll bet that 90% of people, if they knew all of that, aren't going to vote for her. Well, that number might be correct. Let's go to 3-2.
The Democratic Socialists of America, they've got ground troops, and passion matters, and a mobilized base matters, and moderates keep thinking that they can just say shame on you and sign another check. You're going to have to put people on these doors. Otherwise, you're going to have people like this and worse taking over this party.
What percentage of people would you say in New York, in that district, actually voted? What percentage do you think actually voted? She's claiming that she's got a mandate, and she is endorsed by New York City Mayor Zoran Mamdani. She is one of several in New York who unseated Democrats who are in Congress. And also there are people we're not talking about who are doing this in the New York State House. So it isn't just New York City. It's Washington, D.C. It's Chicago. It is Los Angeles. Nithya Raman here. How is that happening? Listen to this. This is clip number 6.
For this last election.
That's so important to understand. If you're looking at these congressional districts, for example, the district in Upper Manhattan and the Bronx, this is a district that has 500,000 registered voters.
How many people voted?
Only 70,000 folks voted in this election that will essentially determine who goes to Congress. And of those 70,000...
Is that a movement, Ryan? If you have that many people and only that small amount voted, is that a movement?
Well, here's the thing. If you have a small, disciplined, organized minority that really knows what it wants and is able to apply that energy and those resources, that small, organized minority can seize the larger brand. And that's what we're seeing here.
There's 500,000 registered voters. Not everybody is registered, of course. 500,000 registered voters in that district. 70,000 voted. That's 14%. 14% of people elected her, and they didn't all vote for her. She got a little over 7%, a little over half of that. So out of 500,000 people, she got 35, 40,000 votes, something like that. And she's going to go to Congress and bring views that are incredibly radical. How did that happen? Well, the number one way that happened is most people didn't vote. You have on one side, you've got people with great passion for something and that passion leads them to activity. They're going out there and they're knocking on doors. They're registering to vote. Maybe they're cheating, right? Maybe they're registering the homeless like we saw here in LA. Maybe they're doing some of that. But you know what? Like what happened in Los Angeles's election, yeah, there's some illegal votes with the homeless and stuff. We don't really know how much. But I would like you to consider that actually maybe there's a lot of people on the ground who are doing everything they can, and a lot of it legal, to get people out to vote who view things their way. And most people just shrug their shoulders and they aren't a part of it. You have passion versus apathy. Apathy is why this is happening. 888-528-2557, 888-528-2557. That is the number. This is the Pastor Scott Show. You can call now with your thoughts. Is this good or bad? Is socialism where we're at today? What does it even mean? What does it mean to you when you hear that? And am I right about the fact that it's apathy? Or is this really the direction of people? 888-528-2557, 888-528-2557. I want you to hear from Darliza Avila Chevalier. She is a DAC, as some people are calling her. And this is another reason I think that her and other Democratic Socialists of America are winning some elections. Go to 7-1.
What I wish is for working class people to have the dignity, the wages, the protections that they deserve. And if the Democratic Party is willing to stand for Medicare for all, is willing to fight for abolishing ICE and bringing them, the billions, trillions of dollars we spend on forever wars back into our communities, then that's the Democratic Party I want to be part of. That's what we're fighting for in these races. And I think we saw over the last, several weeks, months, as progressives around the country are winning. And last night, that this is what the working class and the Democratic electorate is also hungry for.
She's talking about people who are taking action and addressing concerns that people really have about affordability, the ability to buy a place, the ability to pay rent, the ability to cover your health care. Right? These are real issues. And most people, I think, in both parties would think that those things are getting worse, not better. Am I right? And I think people in both parties would probably say we're not really doing a good job in reining that in. We're seeing, I think, some better things. We're seeing all of this fraud getting exposed. Hopefully we'll continue to do that, stop the fraud, keep a lot of people from doing that in the future. All of that is good. But I think that often what happens when you only have 14% of your people vote, and half of those people vote for somebody who is super radical, with ideas that they probably don't even know she believes. I think what they hear is somebody who just sounds like they are listening to her. 7-2.
I think what's important for me right now is saying that we won with a mandate in this race. We won across the entire district, and that the message that we had at the doors resonated. People want affordability. They want politicians who will stand up against ICE, who will stand up against forever wars, and who want to see the resources that we pour into agencies that do not make us safer back into our neighborhoods, in hospitals, and in healthcare, in education, the things that actually make lives dignified and beautiful here in New York 7.
So, that sounds pretty good if no one else is saying anything better. People are like, yeah, you know what? It could be better. It could be safer. We could have better, situations for our living, and we're getting taken advantage of. So you kind of hit those by rich people. You hit those emotional markers, and it's working. To me, I see this and I feel like this is something that I find alarming, and I think it's because I'm old enough to have seen communism. And that's what we're talking about here, by the way. This is one of the reasons I'm asking you about socialism. Because often when we have the conversation about socialism, people think different things. People in America often are saying, no, this isn't. We're talking about Scandinavian countries who are socialist. And look, their polls say they're the happiest people on earth. But what's interesting? I did a deep dive on that over the weekend. This is the Pastor Scott Show at pastorscottshow.com. Phone number is 888-528-2557, 888-528-2557. I did a deep dive over the weekend. And countries like Sweden, Denmark, Norway, and Finland, generally, those are the ones that people are putting out there as the countries that maybe we want to emulate. People like Bernie Sanders will bring those countries up. Everybody is corrupt. Except for those countries, he would say. And he would say, I'm a democratic socialist, and I want to have that kind of socialism. That's what I'm talking about. But what's interesting is that these countries are actually, when you ask them, they don't consider themselves socialist economies, or they don't use that word in the same way we're using it. Instead, they're usually described by economists as capitalist market economies with extensive welfare states, meaning that they are not socialist. Socialism means the government owns the means of production. Right? The government owns your business. Maybe you get to operate it. Maybe you get to make the decisions. And there's a lot of different ways you could play that out, but you don't really own it. Right? So you hear a lot of language about workers and workers' rights and workers' ownership. And that all sounds good until you get into the details of it, I think. Well, what you're seeing in these countries is these are countries that are actually very much capitalistic countries, but they are welfare states. They have very high taxes and generous social benefits, usually health care. Government health care is what we're hearing about. And there is significant government regulation, really big governments. However, big government involvement, I should say. However, there's private ownership. And it's dominant. IKEA, Volvo, Novo Nordisk, Maersk, Spotify. I didn't even realize Spotify was a foreign company. They're all privately owned, and they compete in global markets. The former Danish Prime Minister Lars Rasmussen famously told an audience at Harvard Kennedy School, Denmark, he said, is far from a socialist plan economy. Denmark is a market economy. And I think that's an important point to make, that these leaders are saying this in these countries, because whenever we have a conversation about socialism, usually somebody is pointing to, hey, look at these countries, they're socialist and look what they're doing. And that is not what the Democratic Socialist Party, Democratic Socialists of America, DSA, are about. And by the way, these countries are wrestling with a lot of big problems. Big government. This is a argument that goes back all the way, probably back to the beginning of time, really. But if you really want to read a lot about it, you got Plato, you got Aristotle, and they go back and forth about how much government is too much government. Same type of conversation, really, we might have today, or what we used to have. And some people think big government is better. Some people think smaller government is better. The problem with big government is that it only works under certain conditions. And in these countries in Europe, they've got some problems. One of them is aging populations. They're not having babies either. Their birth rate is lower than ours. One of the reasons that so many of these countries took in a lot of immigrants from Syria and around is because the welfare state that they made can't operate if you don't have a growing population. If the population can't support with the tax income the people who are getting older and the people who need the health care and stuff, well, then you don't have it. So what's happening is the immigration didn't work too well. Some of those countries are deporting people or getting them to leave, like we are doing here in different ways. These countries have much lower economic growth than in previous decades. They have much higher healthcare costs, like everywhere else. They have all kinds of challenges with immigration and integration, which is the bigger issue, I think, with that. And they want to maintain the generous social welfare benefits without raising taxes further, and they can't. So what they're doing is they're reducing the benefits because they have to. They're raising the retirement ages, which is what we are going to be doing here. Social Security, do you know that in 2032, it's only going to meet 80% of its obligations right now in the United States, 80%. It's just math. It's not sustainable. Probably at some point what we're going to do is we're going to raise that retirement age. So if you think you're retiring at 65 or 67, it might be 70 or 72. That's what's coming because of math, not because of left or right-wing politics. It's because of math. Well, that's what's happening in Europe right now. And they're privatizing portions of healthcare because it's not working the way it was supposed to be working. And they're encouraging more and more competition in public services. So even these countries are adjusting their models. But the Democratic Socialist platform is not any of that. And I think this is something that's important for us to recognize. I think it's important, and I'm speaking as a guy who's got kids who are teenagers who are going to come into a world where I recognize there are problems. It's going to be difficult for my son who graduates next year to move out if he wants to. Where's he going to rent? Now, he can leave the state and do better, but if he wants to stay here, he's probably not going to be able to. It's too expensive. I had no problem renting an apartment when I moved out at 18. I think I moved into the dorms at 18, but I got my first place apartment at 19. No problem. And he's going to have a problem because you got to make a lot of money in order to do that. Is he ever going to be able to buy a house? That's a big part of the American dream. That's a big part of being able to invest. That's a big deal. So I understand why some people are concerned and then turning to organizations that want something else. Here's what the Democratic Socialists of America put down just recently in their platform. Okay, this is what they are about. Abolish the United States Senate. Okay, so they're talking about destroying the U.S. government as we know it. They want to abolish the Senate, and they want to implement proportional representation and ranked choice voting in all elections and abolish the United States Senate. They want to replace the president and the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court doesn't always go your way. Split decision today on whether or not they supported the Trump administration or not, depending on what it is and the decisions that they made. And actually, the Supreme Court does not vote most of the time by partisan lines, by the way, in case you wonder. A lot of the time, almost half, they vote 9-0. They actually agree. And most of the time, they're not voting just on partisan lines. Most people don't know that. We usually only hear about the partisan cases. They want to replace the president and the Supreme Court. They just want to abolish it. They want to replace the president, Supreme Court with an executive and judiciary chosen and that is chosen by and subordinate to Congress. So they want to expand Congress, the House of Representatives, which is already one of the most functional bodies out there in the United States. Wouldn't you say?
Get your story straight.
It's not. So they want to take probably the least functional part of our federal government and make it the only part of our federal government. So that Congress will choose the president and Congress will choose who's on the Supreme Court, and there'll be no Senate. There'll be no checks and balances. They want to defund the Department of War. They don't want to have any military at all. They want to close all military bases overseas and just not have any military whatsoever if they can get away with it. They want to abolish prisons. Free Palestine, of course, is a big part of that. They want to end sanctions. Where would you say they want to do that? They want to end sanctions on Cuba, Venezuela, and Iran. They want amnesty for all. They want public ownership of major corporations. That's actual socialism or communism, where the government, that House of Representatives, will own the corporations. How well do you think they're going to operate your company? And they want to remake elections nationwide, basically making it so they can't lose. We're voting for that. We have one of those people on the ballot for mayor in Los Angeles. There are people running with that as their party platform in San Diego and probably in your town. Why is that? Why are we there? This is the Pastor Scott Show, 888-528-2557. 888-528-2557 is the number. When we come back, we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about what happens sometimes when you make decisions and there are unintended consequences like these. We'll take your calls when we come back in just a moment. Stay tuned.
Scott.
Welcome back, everybody. We're live. Pastor Scott Show. Phone number is 888-528-2557. 888-528-2557. 81.
One of the best examples, I think, of suicidal empathy happening in real time is a town in Michigan called Hamtramck. And I believe it was the first town in the United States that authorized the Muslim call to prayer in the morning. The liberal people in that town wanted to protect Muslim rights. There was a whole bunch of people from Bangladesh and I think Armenia coming into the town. And these were the people who were very much pro-LGBTQ++. So they welcomed tons of refugees into their small town, who eventually became the majority. And then what happened is you got the first mayor from this country. City council became all Muslim. It's an example of you have to be careful of the unintended consequences of good intentions. Because what happened in that town this year is that they banned the pride flag. So now you have an all-Muslim city council and mayor, and now they've taken down all the pride flags. And the liberal women who were behind this whole movement are now like, what's going on? And now they're being completely rebuked.
So you have this town in Michigan, Hamtramck, I think is actually how you say it, in Michigan. And a very liberal town, very liberal city, and they are very pride-friendly, LGBTQ plus friendly, and they want to have pride flags all up and down town. And there used to be a bunch of people. But at the same time, they also want to make sure that we're welcoming refugees and things like that. But their attitude, in my opinion, is not really about taking care of, they're not listening to what that means. And what happened is they invited a bunch of Muslim refugees to their town. They got elected. They elected those people on the city council. It's completely Muslim city council. And they banned the pride flags everywhere. You can't do it in in the city anywhere. And now the same people who put them in power are all upset about it. And they're suing the city over it. And it's not winning, 8-2.
And it reminds me of communism, where the agitators and the revolutionaries are just useful idiots for the people who want to take power. And whether it's communists, people from a different country or worldview, take a look at that town. Tell me what you think about it, because I think that is a little microcosm of what could happen on a grand scale in Europe and North America if we're not sure about making sure people share our values before we put them in a position to take over. Here's a story of how a liberal town that was very pro-LGBTQ went to a town that now bans Pride Month and Pride Flag.
And it's because they didn't understand what they were doing. They didn't realize that, hey, the value, if you care about a certain thing, you need to vote that way. And if you vote against that, or if you don't believe people when they say that they're for a certain thing that you'd be really against because you feel bad for them about something, you're going to end up having something that you didn't like. There's some phrase out there that somebody put. It's a leopard ate my face off, and I didn't realize that was going to happen when I voted for the leopards eating faces off political party. that is what we're doing, I think, with democratic socialists in this country. So why is it that we are electing people who openly, according to their platform online, want to essentially abolish everything that is the United States? 888-528-2557, 888-528-2557. Charles in L.A., welcome to the Pastor Scott Show.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm good, Charles. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
Go ahead.
Well, my viewpoint is this, that, the Democratic Party needs to do something itself to help their cause in stopping this. But what I really wanted to make a point on is, history does repeat itself, Pastor Scott.
Mm-hmm.
And I can go back 109 years ago when in Russia, Vladimir Lenin rose to power because he promised everything, equality, you name it. Did he perform and end up giving what they wanted? Yeah, they were equal, but all the Russians were equally in poverty.
Right.
Okay. Bottom line is he was a democratic socialist. That's what he called himself. All that word means to me is it's communism in disguise. And I wish the voters that put these people in would actually take time to read what their platform is, because if they really took time to do that, I don't know if that many people would vote for them.
I don't think most would. In fact, when you get into the Soviet history, most people didn't support Lenin either. Just most people were so mad at the czars and mad about their situation that they went along with the revolution, or they didn't stand opposed to it.
Well, you're absolutely right about that. And that what you're talking about also is people become apathetic.
Yes.
They don't care. They don't vote. I mean, you put up a statistic that 500,000 people and only 14% voted.
That's right. And that means only a little over 7% actually have put this person in who wants to do who, by the way, hates the Democratic Party. So she's running as a Democrat, and she hates the Democrats. But they openly say, hey, we're using the Democrats as a tool because it works for us.
Yes, and that's exactly what I believe is really wrong in that party right now.
And your point is right. Democrats are going to have to stand up and fix this.
They are. I mean, the bottom line is if what I really wish would happen is that the Democrats would start standing up to these people. But I think the Republicans, instead of using it as ammunition against the Democratic Party, maybe that could possibly be the one thing that would unite both parties against the socialist movement.
Mm-hmm.
That's ideal. That's idealistic on my part. But to me, that would be a great way to stop it, and it would be a great way to unify the two parties on single cause.
I think there are places where the two parties, and I think most people in the two parties are unified on this. And Charles, thanks for calling the Pastor Scott Show. In fact, there are Democrats who are standing up this way to say this isn't who we are. I'm going to do clip number 2. This isn't who we are as a party, and they have signed an agreement that says a whole bunch of stuff. Here's number 2.
There's certain things that I believe in that are not being reflected in the current environment, especially with some of these races on Tuesday. And as we said in our pledge, we're for capitalism, not socialism. We're for safety, not lawlessness. We're proud of America, not ashamed of America. And we need to be promoting those things. And, the far left and the far right, they're all very well organized. But those of us that don't support those far left or far right principles need to do a better job organizing and getting our message out.
That is Democrat Congressman Tom Suozzi, and he and several other Democrats signed a pledge that they support capitalism, they support public safety, they love America, and they came together and do that. I think that apathy is one of the biggest issues in our country today. I also think it's the biggest issue for a lot of us in our life, even in the church in different ways, with the mission that we're supposed to have. Am I right? Are we so apathetic that we are about to lose the country? Are we so apathetic that we can't come together with people on the other side of the aisle who agree on the fundamental principles of our country to actually make sure that we don't lose our freedom? Because people who are getting elected right now are opposed. The Democratic Socialists of America, they're not talking about European socialism. They're talking about the same socialism that was in Cuba, the same socialism that's in Russia, Soviet Russia, same socialism in Venezuela that makes everybody poor. See, and they do that by hanging their hat on compassion. And they rightfully point out problems in our system and problems in our government and problems with inequality and problems in the economy that are not really getting addressed very successfully. And that's exactly what happened in Russia. That's exactly what happened in Venezuela. It's exactly what happened in Cuba that led to those revolutions, except that what happens is everybody got poor. 888-528-2557, 888-528-2557. Everybody got poor except for the leaders. So the leaders of the revolution did two things. The first thing they did was kill the revolutionaries. So the people who put them in power, they were the first to go. Did you know that? That's what happens. You go to the gulag first if you were the ones who helped the revolutionaries get into power. Because eventually, Vladimir Lenin discovered that, or those people discovered that Lenin isn't going to do what you hoped he would do. And so he put you into prison. There's an old Soviet Russian proverb. It goes like this. The old Soviet Russian proverb is that two men walked from, it's St. Petersburg now, but back then it was Leningrad to Moscow. And along the walk, one man had a donkey, and he was able to ride the donkey for most of the trip. The other man didn't have a donkey and had to do the whole thing on foot. The man without the donkey ended up having to buy new shoes because he wore his shoes out. He began to get sore and have trouble with his knees and trouble with his feet because he had to walk a long way. Well, the man who had the donkey was able to keep the donkey fed and able to preserve his shoes and preserve his feet and his body. Well, when they got to Moscow, the man without the donkey went in to complain and said, hey, this is not fair. It's not fair that my friend has a donkey and that he was able to ride it all the way here. And it's not fair that I don't, and that I have had to get new shoes and I'm really sore. And the government officials said, you know what, you're right. This is inequity. This is wrong. This is morally wrong that he has that and you don't. So we're going to fix it. He said, you're going to fix it? And he said, yeah. So what the government officials did was they shot the man's donkey. And that was the solution. That's the story that Russians told about what the communists do, is they don't try to create a system that gets a donkey for the man who was poor. They just make everybody poor. They take away, and so that everybody's poor. The reality is what they probably do was tax the donkey and not shoot the donkey, but take the donkey for themselves. Now they have an extra donkey in the government, and none of the people have a donkey. That'd probably be the better way to do it. That's what happened in Russia. That's what happened in Venezuela. That's what happens in Cuba. That's what happens in all of these states. That's why these philosophies matter so much, and why we have to realize that, yeah, I understand the anger and the frustration and the realities of the world, but when you take a look at what actually happens when these philosophies like rent control are done, who ultimately gets hurt by this? It's not the rich. They just leave town. It's everybody else who ends up picking up the tab. I think this is wrong. If you care about the poor, if you care what's happening in the world, you can't be swayed by philosophies that are proven not to work, that are proven to actually hurt everybody except for the very, very wealthy in charge. When we come back, I'll take your calls, 888-528-2557. We'll begin with Chris in Whittier, 888-528-2557. Pastor Scott Show. We'll be right back on the Monday edition, PastorScottShow.com. Don't go away.
Scott.
Welcome back, everybody. Pastor Scott Show, 888-528-2557 is the number, 888-528-2557. I'll get your calls here in just a moment. First, I'm going to tell you about Sanctuary Metals. Sanctuary Metals is a Christian-owned, faith-based company that will help you secure your future. Sanctuary Metals specializes in helping you move part of your IRA or 401k into physical gold and silver, not just paper investments that rise and fall with the stock market. If you're over 59 and a half, you might be able to roll it over. Your your IRA or 401k, you might be able to roll it over with no taxes and no penalties into a physical gold and silver IRA if you qualify. It takes about 15 minutes to learn about it over the phone with Sanctuary Metals. Their team will walk you through everything, and your metals can be stored safely in IRS-approved vaults, giving you real peace of mind. Call Sanctuary Metals today at 800-801-9877, 800-801-9877. When you call, make sure you tell them Pastor Scott sent you to see if you qualify for a no-fee-for-life precious metals IRA. You can learn more at sanctuarymetals.com. Phone number again is 800-801-9877. Past performance does not guarantee future results. All right, 888-528-2557. Chris and Whittier, welcome to the Pastor Scott Show.
Hey, Pastor. During your last segment, when you told that story about the man and the donkey and the explanation of how communism works, these stories are not being told in the education system at a very early age anymore, because we gave all the foxes the care of the chicken coop and all the little kids. So you don't have a mindset already to feel that we used to have, where you were suspicious, at least, of socialism and communism. And you had good reasons to, because your role models, the adults that were teaching you, your first, second grade teacher, they reinforce that. It's completely the opposite now. And all these little kids, they come up without feeling more suspicious about traditional American values and suspecting that they are the reason that everything is so difficult. Well, then you get into an older age and you start acquiring equity, and equity goes two ways. If you get a job, you start making some money, and maybe you get a house, you start thinking conservative, because that's what equity does. You have stake in the game that's at risk, and you naturally want to protect it. But if your equity is in despair and poverty and having nothing, then your equity is in some kind of a political system that's going to take what you need from people that have it and give it to you. And that's what's happening now.
Well, when you talk about schools, you know, that's one of the areas where people always say, well, we're going to put more money in schools and the education will get better. But actually, it's gotten worse. And on top of that, and you know, what you have is more students doing the same because more are failing. And they can't do math and English. You know, in New York City, we spend a lot here in Southern California on schools, but we're not number one. New York City is number one. And their schools are terrible, and the test scores are bad. And you are graduating kids that can't read like we are. And they keep saying, oh, it's more money. It's not more money. It's you got to teach. You know, Mississippi now is doing great in schools, or at least much better. It's called the Mississippi Miracle, and they're doing it with no more money. They just started teaching things like phonics and teaching like how to actually do math. And they got some of the the political stuff out of the schools, because the purpose of the schools is to educate, not just graduate. There is a way, but the reason I think that we're not in any good shape here in California is because of the apathy. We don't vote for people we don't pay much attention for people who are running for school board, for example.
Exactly. Well, look at what we got right here. On this show, on the Pastor Scott Show, you have this mass of people that are listening to us speaking right now. If just that mass of people made a simple commitment to show up at the poll and express their opinion, whatever it is, if they became a significant part of that tiny 15% of people that actually vote, we could turn the tide. Just us. We could turn the tide.
If people paid attention, but we're going to have to beat apathy, because it ultimately hurts people, right? The policies that are being presented by many people, I think, with good intentions. They really care. They're just bad policies, and they don't care enough to actually look deeply into them and say, what's the long-term effect of all of these things? Chris, thanks for calling the Pastor Scott Show, 888-528-2557. And part of that is the problem with education, is that some people can't. They don't know how. They were never taught in education to look deeper into what really is said. 888-528-2557. Rudy in Diamond Bar, welcome to the Pastor Scott Show.
Hey, Scott. Just wondering if you rent or if you own a home.
I own currently. I have rented
How long
before.
have you owned a home?
4 years.
Okay, and I was wondering, do you think the people who put rent control, like the policies of rent control, do you think those people flee? I mean, the owners, they flee the country or the state?
There are lots of studies on rent control, and very specific ones in New York and in Los Angeles, but also in other countries where that's done. And what the research very clearly says is that the people who are in rent-controlled units, they tend to stay because they can, it's helpful for them, particularly in the short run. The problem is that the owners cannot charge more. Property tax still goes up. Cost of maintenance goes up. So what happens is they eventually stop doing the maintaining. They will sell the building. They will just not maintain it. And then they become slumlords. New York, I was just reading, there are 57,000 empty apartments right now, and housing is a problem. So the research says that existing tenants are not likely to move because you got good rent, right? That's not going up. And that makes plenty of sense. But landlords then reduce the supply of rental housing, and overall city-wide rents go way up and makes the whole city unaffordable. And eventually, your rent-controlled building will be sold and turned into a shopping mall or something.
Yeah, because there's a law here in California that happened before COVID, and the law was you can't raise the rent more than 5% plus whatever inflation is. Mm-hmm. And my landlord is a corporate landlord, and we've paid on time every single time, every month for the past since we've lived there. And if they were able to raise the rents more and kick us out of there than what they're legally allowed to do so, then we would have moved long time ago. Mm-hmm. And the fact that you're speaking like, oh, these people, they should just pick themselves up by their bootstraps, and I
never said any of that.
Poor people.
I never said any of that. In fact, I'm very I understand the situation that you're in.
Well, you're talking about it doesn't help us. Of course it helps us.
No, it helps you for a while. It eventually doesn't help you. Eventually, you will be forced to move because your building will get sold by that corporate entity that owns it.
That's not true, because they'll not be able to raise they won't be able to raise the rent more than 5% plus the inflation.
Mm-hmm. Now yours is a little better
no
deal
matter
than,
what. They raise the rent every year no matter what.
That's right, they do.
Even if their prices don't go up.
When has the price not gone up?
When I know I've rented before housing, mm-hmm. and a house before where the landlord they own the house, and they didn't raise the rent every single year.
Mm-hmm. I've had that situation before.
Why would corporate landlords? Why can't they do that?
Well,
are they not making enough money?
Number one, I'm not a fan of corporate.
Are these multimillionaires who own the housing through an equity firm, mm-hmm. who have no connection to the community whatsoever? Are they going to miss the money?
I'm with you.
They're already filthy rich.
Yeah, Rudy, I'm with you on a lot of that. I don't like the corporate ownership or the situation that you're in. It's another part of the issue. But a lot of landlords
can't even buy a house because we're priced out.
That's right. But the reason the studies say that you're priced out is because of rent controls, because it causes those landlords.
That is not true.
No, all of the studies say that. Rudy, read the studies. Because what happens is nobody builds new housing, and that raises the rents. When there's not available housing for more renters to move in, because landlords aren't building them, and they get to a place where they don't rent them out because they can't afford it anymore, or they don't want to afford it, which is the case sometimes. They just don't. Then all of the city rents go up everywhere, and then nobody's building new housing. That's the long-term effect, and that's what all the studies have said, including studies here in L.A., New York, other places. And I understand. I think the rents are outrageous. I don't know how you pay it. And my last place was the house next to us paid 3 times the rent we paid. I don't know how they did that. Well, they did it by having like 16 college students living there. That's how they did it. But a family couldn't do it.
Well, that's exactly my point.
Mm-hmm.
And you're talking about how these policies don't help the common person. Of course, they help the common person.
What I'm saying, and
otherwise,
I'm almost to the break.
These corporate landlords would just kick us all out. Then more people would be homeless.
They only kick you out if other people can afford to pay that rent. And so the problem
exactly. So they don't care about us. They only want the more money.
They don't care about you. No, I'm not totally disagreeing with you.
You know why?
Listen. I'm almost out of time. Listen. I'm going to put you on hold because you're not listening. They don't care about you. I don't even disagree on the corporate ownership. I don't like it. I think it is bad. But the reason that we don't have enough housing, the reason that rents are getting so high, is because of government involvement that makes it not profitable for people who want to make a profit to build more units. Or that it's more profitable to leave it empty than to actually have and just take the tax write-off of having an empty unit. That's basic economics. I would encourage you, Rudy. I'm not against you. I'm with you. But you got to look at the long term. We got to look at the long term. Trump's against the corporate thing. That's why, that's an interesting thing there. All right, I got to go. We'll talk about this more often, but we're out of time today. Go to PastorScottShow.com, PastorScottShow.com to follow us online. Follow us on socials at Pastor Scott Show. See you tomorrow from 3 to 5. We're live.